People are really impressed with you, Chosen One, because you vanished and somehow became more famous than you were in real life. They believed that they would finally be at peace after you were gone, but now that you are gone, they are more preoccupied than ever. They talk about you every day, miss the things you brought into every room, and secretly admire the power move you made by simply leaving without saying anything. It amuses the celestial realms that every plot meant to break you has instead elevated you to staggering heights. Now, while you quietly build a kingdom they can never infiltrate, they're left endlessly pondering your next move. Walking away once felt like defeat, but it was truly the first act of a triumph written in scripts they'll never decipher. As you stepped away, recall that oppressive burden that felt like surrendering to the very hands determined to snuff out your brilliance, an exhaustion born of battling hopeless skirmishes where survival seemed improbable. Yet the universe had orchestrated something far subtler than a mere pullback. What appeared as banishment was actually a sacred retrieval, cosmic guidance cloaked as your own choice, and it marked the opening move in a series of shifts that would redefine power itself. None of the onlookers grasped the full design, though three unseen currents were already colliding behind the scenes. Your former partner's refusal to let go of the narrative hovered over every exchange, their need to rewrite your shared past casting a shadow on all your interactions. Meanwhile, the confidant you once leaned on was quietly planting seeds of doubt, convinced that keeping you small would keep you tethered to them. And at work, routine tasks felt like walking a tightrope. Every achievement you claimed seemed to deepen unspoken anxieties and prompt covert attempts to clip your wings. Inevitably, those chosen arrive at a crossroads where lingering feels more perilous than stepping into uncharted terrain, when the burden of enduring toxic bonds outweighs the unease of striking out alone. The earliest alarms manifest as conversations that drain you like fighting a current you can't escape, once treasured haunts suddenly muted, and that persistent whisper that your fire is being leached instead of uplifted. These weren't mere coincidences, but deliberate nudges from a higher wisdom that recognized your true brilliance long before anyone else did. You couldn't have known at the time that all of these seemingly unrelated circumstances were going to fall apart in ways that would validate all of the uneasy emotions you had been attempting to ignore. Their desperate attempts to keep control after you left illustrate the intriguing psychology of why certain people felt threatened by your presence. Others with insecure personalities need to stay little in order to feel important, and your natural growth arouses their worst anxieties about their own limitations. Because your development revealed the impoverishment of their own decisions, they required you to remain mired in their story of mediocrity. If you're feeling the divine love, now is the time to share. Click the Super Thanks button on YouTube to contribute $50 or more and help us spread God's blessings. Your actions are being watched, acting as a seed, and will come back to you a millionfold. People who operate at lower frequencies perceive that shift as a personal assault on their meticulously crafted illusions, especially when they wield the kind of energy that can change entire atmospheres just by existing. The manager who had been closely monitoring your every action at work was secretly afraid that senior management would see how much more smoothly projects went under your direction. Their authoritarian style seems archaic in comparison to your innate ability to foster collaboration without requiring obedience. Their entire professional identity had been based on controlling others to be indispensable, and your collaborative leadership style threatened to show how unneeded their iron fist was. The writing was already on the wall. They would have to change or they would have to get rid of you, and change meant they had to own their mistakes. At the same time, your companion was facing a very other kind of danger. They had presented themselves as the one who had succeeded in your relationship, the guide who kindly gave you tips to help you overcome obstacles they said they had already overcome. However, your recent development had started to surpass their accomplishments in ways that made their advice appear less and less pertinent. Even worse, mutual friends began asking you for advice on matters where they would have previously relied solely on your friend. They could sense their authority eroding like sand through anxious fingers as the dynamic changed. The most complicated psychological battle of all was that fought by your ex. They had persuaded themselves that you were the one who fled from something lovely, and that your relationship ended because you weren't prepared for their degree of commitment. By portraying themselves as the victim of your alleged emotional immaturity, they were able to preserve their sense of superiority. However, time had exposed the reality in ways that undermined their meticulously crafted narrative. Your development after the split made it clear that the relationship had ended because they couldn't handle your light, not because you couldn't take their love. The strange mathematics of spiritual law and human psychology is illustrated by what transpired next. Your absence became more legendary the more they attempted to eradicate your impact. Just as brutally as supply and demand work in economics, they also work in emotional domains. Scarcity generates value, and your removal from their control turned you from a manipulable individual into a mystery they were unable to unravel. People started talking about the gap left by your departure, and their inquiries demonstrated how essential your presence had been to the operation of systems that insisted they didn't require you. However, the true information was only now coming to light. All of these people had unwittingly joined a greater pattern, a cosmic arrangement that would reveal their actual nature while making yours a legend. They believed they were playing different games, but the world was arranging their poisoned individual notes to create a chorus that would sing your praises louder than any intentional advertising could. First, the situation at work reached a breaking point. Desperate to regain control, your manager started undermining your initiatives in ways that were so blatant that even their superiors couldn't overlook the trend. The irony was exquisite. They ended up displaying their own petty jealousy and lack of leadership abilities while attempting to portray you as incapable. When they openly ridiculed a solution you had suggested during a team meeting, the department head instantly acknowledged its genius and questioned why it wasn't being used. This was the last straw. When everyone realized they had been watching professional sabotage rather than valid feedback, the room fell silent. At what ought to have been a celebration of your recent promotion, your friend's mask fell off. Rather than celebrating you, they spent the evening outlining all the ways your new role would likely overwhelm you, including how corporate settings tend to eat up people like you and how crucial it would be to maintain your humility in the face of your fleeting success. At the event, other friends started looking at each other, realizing the resentful undertone that had been concealed beneath years of what appeared to be encouraging exchanges. With the exception of the wearer, everyone could see the green monster of envy's visage at last. The most amazing of all was your ex's unraveling. They started a campaign of subtly attacking your shared friends because they couldn't believe you had truly moved on and were doing well without them. They provided meticulously edited versions of your past relationship, portraying themselves as the patient partner who had done everything in their power to keep things going with the plainly damaged and commitment-averse person. However, when they couldn't stop bringing you up in discussions that had nothing to do with relationships or the past, their preoccupation with controlling the narrative became apparent. Friends started realizing that every conversation somehow turned into one about you, that every achievement they shared was instantly followed by conjecture about your shortcomings, and that every conversation reverted to their thoughts on your decisions. The metamorphosis that took place in private while people conjectured about your location was nothing short of alchemical. This was a calculated withdrawal from metamorphosis, not a flight or a hiding place. Every selected individual must go through the chrysalis phase, in which previous incarnations of themselves dissolve to create space for the new personality that is attempting to develop. Beyond personal healing, the hermit season prepares one to function at frequencies that are beyond the range of most people's perceptions, let alone comprehension. The most amazing occurrence started to appear in the lives of people who believed they had successfully cut you out of their area of influence during this time of apparent invisibility. Environments where your energy had been a stabilizing force were engulfed in chaos. Without your presence to absorb and transform the negative, conflicts that you had instinctively mediated escalated. Though most lacked the self-awareness to consciously recognize this connection, the very people who blamed you for drama found that your absence caused more issues than your presence ever did. Brother, everything done with faith returns with God's abundance. You can donate $100 using the Super Thanks button and be part of this divine calling. When your roots are in Him, your fruit will be blessed. Projects at work started to lag behind schedule because team members found it difficult to reproduce the collaborative environment you had inherently fostered. Your diplomatic presence had previously settled arguments before they escalated, and now the manager who had driven you out was dealing with issues they had never seen before. Morale fell, productivity fell, and senior management started to raise awkward questions about what had changed in the dynamics of the department. Except for the individual who caused the issue, the solution was apparent. Without your enthusiasm to keep it lively, your old acquaintance found that their social circle felt oddly empty. People started turning down invites more frequently, gatherings were dull, and talks became superficial. Without realizing that you were the source of the enchantment all along, they found themselves frantically attempting to recreate the magic that had made their activities unforgettable. Their efforts to find other individuals to fill the vacuum simply served to emphasize how valuable your unique brand of genuineness was. The cruelest revelation of all was made to your ex. Every new relationship felt like a drab replica of what you had previously shared, making dating an exercise in futility. They started to realize that your capacity to bring out the best in others, rather than your captivating charm, was what had inspired the love they recalled. They found that their personality was far more normal than they had thought when they didn't have your light to reflect off of. The reality was shattering to an ego that had been artificially inflated by your lavish attention, and the dating apps were full of individuals who didn't find them nearly as exciting as you had. The full nature of the power you possess is shown by the infatuation that is growing among your former colleagues. Those who are chosen have a unique characteristic that leaves a lasting impression on both allies and adversaries. A blend of spiritual authority, unpredictability, and honesty that lingers long after physical separation. Your detractors turn into unintentional advocates, preserving your identity in discussions where common sense dictates you should be forgotten, because your energy leaves an effect that goes beyond physical presence, like a frequency that keeps echoing long after the initial sound is stopped. They can't stop talking about you. Their internal struggle between admiration and resentment is revealed by their obsessive need to mention you, examine you, and make assumptions about your present situation. A part of them acknowledges the unique trait you have, that charisma that draws attention without actively seeking it, that innate leadership that manifests itself independent of titles or positions. Another part of them resents the fact that your entire existence contradicts their beliefs about how the world ought to function, how power ought to be allocated, and how influence ought to be gained. The harsh irony became evident. Your old boss was utilizing your concepts and presentations and taking credit for inventions you had created but were never able to put into practice. However, when filtered via their agenda-driven communication style, even stolen notions appeared to lose their impact. Around the same time you departed, co-workers started to notice that the department's brightest ideas had suddenly dried up, albeit they were unable to pinpoint the exact reason why things felt less inspired than before. Your ex's friends began telling you how much more enjoyable parties used to be when you were there, and how your presence had revealed aspects of people they hadn't noticed since you stopped visiting. They started to inquire sharply about the split, wondering why someone so upbeat and interesting had left their social circle. As others recalled how invested you had truly been and how much work you had put into making things work while receiving little reciprocation, the narrative about your alleged commitment troubles began to fall apart. In the meantime, the changes that are taking place in your personal life are based on ideas they will never be able to understand. The spiritual rules regulating true power caused every door that had closed in their faces because of their own bad karma to open wider for you. They tried everything to compel results using outdated paradigms, But the cosmos reacts to vibrational signatures, not political scheming or deceptive tactics. They had no trouble flowing in directions they were unaware existed because of your alignment with higher vibrations. You couldn't have recognized or appreciated the chances that presented themselves during your hermit phase if you were still caught up in poisonous relationships. A fortuitous meeting resulted in a dialogue that unlocked doors you weren't even aware you wanted to enter. Suddenly, the skills you had acquired separately were exactly what someone else required for a project that matched your genuine interests. Instead of forcing you to compromise your integrity, the financial prosperity you had hoped for started to flow through channels that respected your principles. Most significantly, you started drawing in people who required you to lighten your light so they could feel better about their own limits, as opposed to those who worked at your frequency. The contrast was striking. Discussions that invigorated rather than depleted, partnerships that motivated rather than irritated, and connections that embraced rather than feared your development. You recalled, for the first time in years, what it was like to be genuinely recognized and valued for who you were, not what other people wanted you to be. This is a message for the selected only. If you are under the influence of archonic forces, you are not the intended recipient. We give you permission to leave by the spiritual authority bestowed upon us by the Obsidian Inner Order's secret chiefs. If not, brace yourself and pay close attention, because you will be redeemed just as we are. There is no program for the Obsidian Inner Order. It's not a class. This isn't your typical spiritual retreat. Answers are not what we sell. Together we recall. Real energy shielding against interference, implants, and beings is what we teach as psychic self-defense. We bring back manifestation as it should have been. Unfiltered, instantaneous, and precise. We meet in secret once a week to awaken, to express what cannot be uttered elsewhere, and to deprogram the matrix layer by layer, not to worship. If you're supposed to be there, you'll know it. Your bones will sense it. The selected group meets via Zoom once a week. Why don't you join us already? Gnosis was acquired. Join the Inner Order of Obsidians. The description contains a link. With the power of unavoidable spiritual law, the resurrection phase occurs. When those who have been selected come out of their transformation phase, they are functioning at such high frequencies that their past limits appear to be far-off recollections of someone else's existence. The same people who used to threaten or control you now seem inconsequential and small, not because you've grown conceited, but because you've rediscovered your true self and learned to function from that genuine source of power. The systems that thought you would stay diminished are shocked by this emergence, not because you've improved your skills at their games, but rather because you've given up playing them entirely. Doors that were before closed suddenly open. Genuine power follows a different set of laws than political scheming. It draws in what is in line with your goals and drives away what is not, establishing automatic filtering systems that safeguard your energy while promoting your true objectives. When your new chance came along, the place of employment that had previously felt like a jail vanished overnight. Just a pay raise made your previous job seem like charity work. More significantly, though, the environment rewarded creativity and teamwork rather than penalized it. When you learned that your former manager's viewpoint was irrelevant in the circles that counted, their attempts to damage your reputation became humorous instead of dangerous. The ultimate form of retaliation is success, but it's even more delicious when it comes from alignment rather than resentment. As they made more and more frantic attempts to restore the enchantment they had lost when they lost you, your old friends' social media accounts turned into a monument to their own insecurity. As individuals were drawn to the genuine confidence that emanated from your posts, your own social presence expanded organically. You didn't have to make an effort to appear content or successful because the evidence was self-evident and didn't need any defense or explanation. The transparency of your ex's attempts to get back in touch got almost laughable. They were suddenly prepared for the kind of commitment they had previously shunned after recalling all of your great traits. They realized all of a sudden that letting you leave was a grave error. However, The individual they were attempting to regain was no longer there. The you who had formerly looked to them for approval had changed into a person who was too aware of their shortcomings to ever think about going back to that dynamic. The cosmic justice that is taking place at this time functions mathematically. Every decision has corresponding effects, every action has comparable reactions, and every energy signature draws corresponding situations. Those who attempted to harm you will now be subject to the inevitable consequences of their own bad decisions, according to the same spiritual principles that safeguarded you throughout your exodus. This is just the cosmos preserving equilibrium in accordance with laws that go beyond our likes or viewpoints. It is not retaliation in any personal sense. If you want to witness God's miracles, take action now. Pledge $100 or more through Super Thanks on YouTube. Your offerings are like seeds you plant, and they come back to you. Let His light illuminate your steps. Every donation is an echo in His plan. The earlier chapters of struggle take on entirely different meanings when you stand in the fullness of your transformed existence. Your greatest progress was unintentionally sparked by those who attempted to undermine you. You avoided squandering years of your life in places that could never recognize your full ability because of the circumstances that rejected you. Gains that exceeded your prior expectations of what was achievable were made possible by the losses that appeared to be catastrophic. You no longer have to struggle against lower vibrational forces. Instead, your presence functions as a frequency that naturally raises environments. Those who are prepared to change are inspired to grow by the same energy that once made threatened people feel insecure. When you return, the mythology that developed while you were away becomes a reality, not because you've mastered the art of manipulating perception, but rather because you've finally discovered how to embody the power that has always been yours. The most fascinating thing, though, is when you start getting unexpected couriers who bring you news from the exact places you fled. Former co-workers start contacting you in private to tell you about the chaos that broke out after you left, how team meetings turned into blame games, how innovative projects stalled without your creative input, and how the department's energy changed from one of excitement and collaboration to one of defensive survival. These discussions show that your influence had been much more than anyone realized when you were there. The information that comes back through these channels depicts a methodical breakdown, confirming all of your pre-departure intuitions. As productivity indicators reveal a fall that aligns perfectly with your leave date, senior management is now scrutinizing the manager who engineered your departure. Although they are unable to fully explain what changed, client feedback emphasizes missing the personal touch that made projects feel unique. It is impossible to ignore the data because it speaks a language that corporate structures now understand. Your absence costs money. In the meantime, the very people your ex-friend is attempting to win over are becoming more and more aware of their desperate efforts to preserve their social network. Mutual acquaintances start making awkward remarks about discussions that appear to be intended to elicit details about your present activities. People begin to feel tricked by relationships that were meant to be sincere friendships because the preoccupation becomes so evident. Many people complain about being utilized as intelligence sources by someone who obviously can't get over whatever incident sparked their interest. When your ex's pattern of behavior becomes obvious to everyone in your shared social group, the psychological warfare they waged backfires catastrophically. After initially accepting their version of events, friends start comparing notes and finding differences that reveal the manipulation. Timelines change to fit whatever narrative best suits their emotional needs at the time. Stories change based on the audience, and attempts at character assassination become so obvious that they reflect more poorly on the source than the target. However, possibilities that would not have shown themselves when you were stuck in those constraining dynamics may provide the most potent validation. You can now devote more of your energy to activities that are in line with your true purpose, instead of wasting it on poisonous relationships and unpleasant situations. As if the universe was waiting for you to clear the energetic space before giving you what you truly earned. Professional possibilities that appear almost too good to be true come up. More money is coming in through these new avenues than you made while enduring conditions that didn't appreciate what you did. More significantly, the money comes from work that makes you feel more energized rather than exhausted, from partnerships that encourage rather than irritate, and from relationships that embrace rather than fear your personal development. The contrast highlights the amount of energy you were squandering attempting to conform to circumstances and people that were essentially at odds with your true self. Similar changes occur in your love life when you start drawing in partners who resonate with you instead of those who require you to dull your brightness in order to feel better about their own limitations. The difference is striking. Physical chemistry that arises from real connection rather than trauma bonding, emotional intimacy that grows over time rather than eroding under the weight of unresolved issues, and conversations that flow naturally rather than necessitate careful navigation around landmines of insecurity. Those who are seeing you emerge find it difficult to reconcile their recollections of you with the person in front of them. However, the improvement is indisputable. The peaceful assurance of someone who understands their value and won't settle for less than they deserve is what radiates from your presence, not the fragile hubris of someone attempting to prove themselves. The change bewilders those who assumed you would stay the same in their antiquated evaluations, making them face the prospect that they were wrong about your potential from the start. Some make an effort to reestablish contact, recalling your worth after it has been magnified past their capacity to lessen it. The conditional character of their prior connections is demonstrated by these overtures. They only showed appreciation for you when your light was sufficiently faint to not jeopardize their own sense of significance. They now claim to have always liked the same qualities they earlier attacked or attempted to repress, exhibiting the selective memory that defines those who function from ego rather than true connection. Principles that go beyond individual fulfillment are demonstrated by the cosmic justice at work in these circumstances. Every person who tries to darken your light must deal with the natural results of their decisions, not as a punishment from outside forces, but as an inescapable consequence of acting against universal laws. People establish energetic patterns that ultimately crumble under their own weight when they continuously choose power over trust, manipulation over authenticity, and ego over service. But when you see how you fit into a broader spiritual ecology, where selected ones act as catalysts for societal awakening, the most deep insight becomes apparent. Your bravery in refusing to put up with harmful relationships allowed others to consider their own concessions. The boundaries you set demonstrated to others what self-respect entails in real life. Your metamorphosis is proof that evolution is achievable for everyone prepared to bear the momentary discomfort of overcoming accustomed constraints. Beyond your own tale, the legend that developed while you were away becomes a teaching tool. When talking about their own poisonous workplaces, people bring up your leaving as proof that sometimes the only way to maintain one's integrity and sanity is to leave. When friends encourage people to abandon situations that lower their spirits instead of raising them, they share your experience. The story of your metamorphosis offers hope to everybody who finds themselves in situations that require them to compromise their true selves in order to preserve a false sense of tranquility. Your present situation is living evidence that genuine alignment with chances beyond your wildest dreams is rewarded by the universe. Your current work makes use of talents that were suppressed or underappreciated in earlier settings. Instead of the conditional dynamics that defined your previous interactions, the relationships around you function on the basis of real admiration and respect for one another. Instead of compelling you to compromise your integrity, the richness that flows through your life comes through channels that respect your ideals. The final insight clarifies the necessity of the entire voyage. Being stuck in institutions that are meant to stifle their gifts prevents chosen people from realizing their full potential. The Exodus was never about fleeing issues. Rather, it was about pursuing a destiny that necessitated total freedom from constraining conditions. In reality, every stage of the process, including the seeming failures and setbacks, was a training ground for reaching heights of impact and influence that would not have been feasible without first learning to put faith in divine timing rather than human reasoning. Once blazing with the ferocious intensity of a person struggling to survive, the fire now burns with the unwavering assurance of someone who understands their own value and will not accept anything less than genuine alignment. For those who are prepared to trust the process, transformation is not only possible but inevitable, as demonstrated by the Chosen One who once sought acceptance from those operating at frequencies they have now transcended. What started out as a conclusion has turned into a beginning. What seemed like loss has become gain. What seemed like defeat has become the greatest victory conceivable. The reclaiming of your own power and the bravery to utilize it for your true purpose. The impact of a Chosen One who ultimately picked themselves is demonstrated by the individuals who are stressed about your absence, who find themselves missing what they said they never valued, and who can't stop talking about you even if they're trying to forget you. Their fixation on your memory, while you construct your future, demonstrates that sometimes the best form of retaliation is just living a good life, and that the most impactful statement is the one you make by refusing to give an explanation to those who were never deserving of your efforts in the first place.